Chris Cuomo, let's get after it. Headlines are hyping that President Biden made an unprecedented move, leaving Israel in the lurch, pausing weapon shipments to keep them from invading Rafah. But there are several reasons to back away from all the fulminating here. First, Israel may already have what they need to do what they want in Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a nod to this by responding this morning, tweeting, "If we have to stand alone, we will stand alone and win." Of course, Israel is not alone. America has provided the lion's share of funding and firepower they're using, and this is just a pause to delay an offensive, not to hinder any defensive actions, and certainly it isn't permanent. Also, while the right is trying to play this situation as if what President Biden has done is unheard of, history says otherwise. Bush the first denied loan guarantees to Israel in the 90s when they were building settlements, and it was used to force them to sit with Palestinians at what became the Madrid Peace Conference. Well, but that wasn't in a time of war. Fair point. Well, what about what President Reagan did? He denied F-16s after Israel hit an Iraqi nuclear reactor in 1981. Yeah, but that wasn't a direct confrontation with an enemy who was attacking. Fair point again. So what about when Reagan, the gold standard of Republican presidents, denied jets when Israel went after Lebanon and Hezbollah, conditioning the aid on a withdrawal from there? Look, the point is, America has made moves like this before. That doesn't mean this is the right move at the right time for the right reason, but it's not unprecedented. And in fact, I'll give you a provocative question that should be asked, and in fact, I'm going to ask it to our first guest. There is a suggestion that America certainly promotes Israel's military. Nobody does more than we do. But, could it be true that America has a track record of doing a lot for Israel, but also keeping them from scoring major victories? And if so, why would that be the case? Let's discuss why this move with Biden is different from Israel's perspective. Former Israeli National Security Advisor Eyal Hulata. It's good to have you, sir.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, Chris.
So, why is this move by Biden the wrong move at the wrong time?
Well, you know, as an Israeli, I'm not sure it's my position to give credit to President Biden. I can tell you that from an Israeli perspective, what the Israeli political scene and across the political spectrum and also the public, people are mainly surprised by this move. I've listened to what you said in the beginning, and I think everything you said was absolutely right. The attack that Israel is conducting in Rafah at the moment has been coordinated with the American administration. Israel has not entered heavily populated centers in Rafah, not because the president demands it, or not only because the president demands it, it's because Israel will not attack heavily populated areas in Rafah. We haven't done this in the city of Gaza. We haven't done this in Khan Yunis. We evacuated the population before that. What we're doing now in Rafah, we've controlled the crossing to Egypt, and we're putting pressure on the outskirts of Rafah. All of this has been coordinated with the United States. So I think it is very surprising that while we're in this situation, President Biden comes out with this decision, and with this interview yesterday on CNN. I think there's a lot of surprise in Israel. This is getting a lot of criticism from across the political spectrum. You are right that President Biden, the administration, the United States, have supported Israel a lot. The supplement that is passed by a bipartisan vote, both Republicans and Democrats, an unprecedented amount of money. This is all very, very true. So people in Israel, I think, are very frustrated and surprised that after all of this that has happened, and I think that Israel is doing pretty much aligned with the administration, that this message came yesterday. I'm certainly, personally, very surprised that this came, and also very frustrated.
What about the perspective that Bibi's gone too far? He's far right. He's got a coalition of extremists. We saw that with what he was trying to do with the judiciary before all of this, that there has not been enough attention paid to civilian casualties, that it looks like it's going to be just like that again in Rafah, that the people have not been moved out, that there's nowhere for them to go. And this had to be done to not repeat what has literally filled campuses around the country in America with pushback.
Well, first, I served as a national security advisor to the opposition. So for me, to support Netanyahu and his policies is difficult. And I think that the fact that the ultra-right fringes of Israeli politics is within his government is indeed a problem. Having said all of that, I'm not sure that everything you said before is a good description of what happened. The IDF is fighting a war in a heavily populated Gaza, while Hamas is indeed using Gazans as human shields and preventing them from going to shelter in the tunnels they have dug underneath, or to escape the areas where the IDF is attacking. The IDF has continuously gave advance warning before they entered the populated areas, exactly for that purpose, so that we will minimize the numbers. The numbers of civilian casualties is indeed high, but it's not the amount that the Gazan Ministry of Health is putting outside as propaganda all the time. I'm not sure that Israel deserves all of the criticism, and for sure, what's happening in campuses in the United States, where the protesters are demanding actually the annihilation of Israel, demanding to free the territory from the river to the sea, meaning that there will be no Jews there, undermining the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. I don't think we should justify what's happening in U.S. campuses and all of this criticism. It is true that we have a very right-wing government. I don't support it. I think that there is a majority of Israelis that believe that we need to have an election soon and move ahead. But this is not the full blame of everything that has happened. Hamas started this war. Hamas attacked us on October 7 and murdered our women and children while in their beds, refusing to return the hostages that are still in Gaza, dying by the day. It is Sinwar that is stubborn and refusing to release them in a way that cannot allow a ceasefire to take place, so that we can continue to move ahead. So I know it's easy to be critical on Israel's right-wing government, but we have to get the facts right about how this started, how this is conducted, and what the IDF is doing in Gaza. I think, given the circumstances, we're actually very careful and doing very well.
Well, look, a picture tells 1,000 words, which is also one reason, one criticism that I do have. I'm just telling you what you know to be common criticism of the situation. The fact that Israel will not let the media be on the ground to tell the story in Gaza and eventually in Rafah and eventually in the West Bank, I think is a huge miscalculation. The idea that it's too dangerous, we both know that that's the job that many journalists do. Do you think that's a mistake? And do you think it's Bibi's right-wing advisors that are making this really unprecedented calculation, if we want to talk about unprecedented, that you're not allowing any free media on the ground to tell the story?
Well, of course, on this I have to agree with you. I think that Israel has done a lot of mistakes in the way that we're projecting the story. I think that this perception that journalists cannot cover it, and in fact, sometimes there are limitations. I think that is a mistake. I also think that it was a mistake for the government, and that is a push from the right wing, not to allow all the amount of humanitarian aid that needed to flow into Gaza from day one. And I said this from when the war started. We shouldn't have bargained over humanitarian aid. The Gazans, yes, and I agree with you. The Gazans should not suffer from lack of humanitarian aid, from lack of food and medicine. The fact that in the last few weeks, Israel has done much more, and it's true, after Biden demanded this, after a very bad assault, it was not intentional, but that again, 7 foreign workers of the World Center Kitchen have died in an IDF strike. That is granted. Israel has improved our policies on humanitarian aid. I thought we should have done that from day one and focus on the things that we're right about, where there is the justification to go after Hamas and not to punish the Gazans, and to do as much as we can to allow the story to come out, not to play to the propaganda of Hamas that show the pictures that they put out of Gaza. Some of them are fake, exposing a famine that is not exactly exactly what is happening on the ground. And unfortunately, you're right. I mean, I think Israel should have played the media side way better than we did. And unfortunately, I do think that this is the pressure from the right-wing fringes of this government, and that is a mistake.
Do you think that, I keep hearing from supporters of Prime Minister Netanyahu, see, this is what America does. You let us defend ourselves, you let us beat the enemy, but not completely. This keeps happening. It happened in the 67, it happened in 73, it happened in the 2000s. You don't want us to win the big victory. Why? Now, do you believe that's propaganda, or do you think that that's something that exists in the Israeli mindset?
Well, first of all, I think it does exist in the Israeli mindset. I don't think that this is a right description of what is happening. I don't think that is the problem. I think that there is an aversion in American administrations throughout politics for decades now that things that Israel could do will escalate in ways that will drag the United States in. We've heard that about Iran so many times before, and I think that the fact that the administration have kind of pushed Israel to take the win, I think, as Biden said it, just because we had good defenses doesn't mean that Iran doesn't need to pay a price and that is an unprecedented attack of hundreds of projectiles aiming at killing civilians in Israel. So when we're prevented from that, there is a question there. But I think it becomes of risk aversion more than anything else.
Right. Iran is a weak spot for the United States. We haven't found the leadership to give us a better solution there. 2 administrations in a row. Let's see what happens next time around. Mr. Hulata, thank you very much for making the case and giving us perspective. You're always welcome here. Be well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. To a war abroad, to a war here at home. What's happening on the southern border? Hey, how come there's not more coverage? Nobody covers it more than NewsNation does. Tonight, Dan Abrams is doing an important special immediately following us. Crisis on the border. He's there now. Dan.
Chris, we talk a lot about the politics of the border. I talk a lot about the politics of the border. We all do, to some degree. Look, you're one of the few people who actually gets out there and goes to these stories, right? Well, tonight, we're doing a lot of that. We got Brian Enton at the border. We got Ali Bradley at the border. We're going to be doing it live. They're going to be embedded there at the border so we can try to show people what's actually happening, right? Not the finger pointing, not the who's to blame, but let's start the conversation by actually understanding what's happening. And, kudos to Ali Bradley, who was able to get an interview with a current border agent. Now, of course, they're not allowed to talk, right? But it's such an important perspective to have, to know exactly how they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're thinking. And we had to disguise the voice, so you can't even tell the gender, anything about this person. But here's a little bit of Ali Bradley's interview that we're going to air a lot more of tonight.
What do you believe is one of the things that everyday, ordinary Americans don't understand about the southern border?
The biggest thing is that we do not control the border. The cartel controls the border. Everything that we do is a reaction to things that they have planned. Usually we're chasing around pawns while the kings and queens are doing whatever they want.
I mean, that's just stunning stuff. And, you can only get that perspective from someone who's there now, right? Because things have changed. I mean, you can talk to a former border agent, but, to understand what's actually happening, you got to talk to the people who are there. And the fact that she was able to get that interview, to get this person to speak candidly about what they're going through every day there was, I think, really insightful.
It is, and it's also really sad that in America you got to hide people because they're not allowed to speak their mind about what's going on, even though they're serving the public. We got a lot of messed up things, and it's good that you're shining a light on it, Dan. Very good.
Yeah, and it is kind of amazing that we have to disguise the voice so much because part of what the person's complaining about is the bosses. Right? Is about the kind of work that they're being forced to do, about the problems that are happening there. So, this is the point, is like, you've talked about this, I've talked about this. This is a complicated problem, right? There is no one-size-fits-all solution here. But you got to at least start with some of the facts. You got to start with the fact that, yes, there is a real problem going on. Yes, it is happening every day. Yes, it is impacting communities well beyond the border. Here's how. Okay, once you have that information, now we can have an educated discussion about what we can possibly do in the political environment that we're in.
It's great that that interviewee was talking about the cartels.
Yep.
Because that's what it's all about. If you care about fentanyl, and you and I share this perspective that there's no domestic issue that should unite Americans more than fentanyl. Nobody's ever killed us the way this drug is. It doesn't have the political will behind it. So hopefully there'll be, some momentum after people see the special tonight and they're reminded of how real the problems are there.
300,000+ parents have overdosed. I think it was in the last 10 years. In this country. It is crazy. So, look, it's going to be interesting.
We don't, all the time.
And look, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? If there's some activity happening on the border, we're going to be there. We're going to go right to Brian Enton. We'll go right to Ali Bradley. We'll show people what's happening. We got drones. We got a lot of stuff there to try to just get a little peek during this next hour of exactly what's happening.
I love it. I hope people watch it. And I appreciate you for doing it, and thank you for coming on the show to talk about it.
See ya.
All right. Tonight, right after this, a special edition of Dan Abrams Live, NewsNation live with border authorities as they patrol in real time. They'll also have conversations with police departments across the country examining their piece of the border crisis. Tonight, right after this, 9 p. Eastern. All right, let's take a quick break. 4 minutes, 5 seconds. Coming up, yesterday, we learned, speaking of the border, that Biden did a little twofer, okay? I'm doing an executive action, and Schumer is going to push the bill again to see if we can get it done. Was this a play? Is that all it was? Was just politics? What about the remarks that the president made about the economy being the best in the world right now? Isn't it the economy, stupid, meaning you got to address that people are worried about it? Who better to give us perspective on the politics than the legend political strategist James Carville? Next. All right, President Biden made moves and he's getting some pushback, both on what he did with Israel, but also what he claimed about the U.S. economy. Take a listen.
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of the American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse in the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Yeah, but not everybody's feeling it. And while that was not a contentious interview, you got a lot of people on the left and right kind of holding their heads today, being like, why did he put it that way? Let's bring in Democratic political strategist James Carville. You're the father of It's the Economy, stupid. And it certainly is in this election. And there's a disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. And the president seemed to forget that in this interview.
Well, let me join the head scratching. Okay. I don't think if people don't feel like they're in a good economy, you can't convince them. And I think there's a bunch of Ivy League economists, academic type that go in and say, sir, this is the best economy we've had since 1969. You have to go out and promote it. And that's not the world people are living in. And at some point, Chris, baseball, you got to let the ball come to you. You can't charge the ball. And I agree with the critics that this is not the proper messaging, that you should say these are things we're doing to deal with cost of living. Every first word straight out of his mouth is high cost of living. And that's why we're doing these things, to give families relief. But I agree with the critics on this one.
Grocery store and gas prices. Grocery store and gas prices. That's the manifestation of inflation. That's what I hear about all the time, James. And you know what's interesting? I hear about it from rich people. I hear not that they're suffering, but that it's a metric that they're aware of. Grocery store and gas prices.
Well, but there is good news, but you have to let it seep through. And the truth of the matter is, Chris, in my view, this is an economy that's pretty good for savers. For people like myself that don't have a mortgage, that are net savers. But if you're 26 years old, you have no hope of buying a house, of educating children. You're probably living in the basement with your sister and your mother and daddy's house. And when President Biden tells how good the economy is, the reaction is, what's that guy talking about?
Right.
And
sounds out of it.
I think there's some truth to that. But if you're holding a 3.5% mortgage, you're golden right now. But if you're trying to borrow a mortgage at 7%, you're not very golden.
Can't buy a house. Hey, let me ask you something. Other side of the ball for a second.
Yes,
did you hear what Trump is saying about Bobby Kennedy Jr.? That he's not a real anti-vaxxer? Here's what's fascinating to me about it, James. I want your take, though. Is he's obviously worried. And he's saying if you're voting for him because you're part of the MAGA base that is an anti-vaxxer, he's not the real deal. But he doesn't say he's anti-vax. It's a very nuanced play for Trump, especially, who's usually pretty ham-fisted. He's saying that Bobby's not a real anti-vaxxer. Don't vote for him. But he doesn't say he's anti-vaccine. What do you see in that play?
Well, I think I'll give myself some credit. I've been wrong about many things in my life, but I've been pretty consistent that Bobby Kennedy is a bigger threat to Donald Trump than he is to Joe Biden. And I think that you're seeing this manifest itself, that Trump is now starting to attack Bobby Kennedy. There was this great thing, oh, my God, Kennedy's getting in the race as independent is going to really kill the Democrats. Most Democrats have no idea who the Kennedys are. I mean, it's a great family, but memories tend to be short. So I think what Trump is doing is validating my point of view that Kennedy is, in the end, going to be a bigger drag on Trump than Biden. And I think Trump instinctively recognizes this.
What do you make of Biden's two-pronged pivot on immigration and why it took him so long? He's got the executive action he's doing. Let me put up a couple of poll numbers. Control of the border. The U.S. has control over its borders. The numbers, are in the toilet, but we'll put them up for you. It's like 20% of people say it now. 34% said it last August. Does illegal immigration cause major problems? Over 2 out of 3 say yes, major problems. Is it too little, too late?
I don't think so. I think he listened to these idiot left-wingers when he got into office and got a little bit behind the 8 ball here. But there was a piece by my friend Colin Howard, the Democratic nominee for Senate, with a Republican businessman, is echoing what President Clinton said. Let these people work. All right, they're in here, they're waiting for asylum hearings, they're waiting for this. Let's put them to work. And I think Colin is exactly right. And the piece appeared in the Dallas Morning News Sunday, and President Clinton's been harping on this. We have these migrants, they're here, we're waiting to figure out what to do with them, but let's let them be employed. Let's put them to work. And, people, let me tell you, you have 3.7% unemployment, people want to come to your country. You want to solve the problem on the southern border, get 7% unemployment, and it'll dry up in an instant, I promise you.
Yeah, I don't know. I hear what you're saying about that. A lot of them are working; they're just not paying taxes because you got a lot of employers getting away with having it both ways.
Right, exactly, Precisely.
Well, James Carville, as always, spot on. You're not just the best dressed man in the business. You just straight on accurate.
It's beautiful.
Thank you very much, James Carville.
Thank you, Chris. You bet. Bye-bye. You bet.
Take care. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. You know what he was doing. Right to the game. The case out of New Jersey, all right? It's time to take a look at this. A lot of people are telling me, no, this is too upsetting. What do you mean too upsetting? Do you care or do you not care? There's a father on trial who allegedly forced his 6-year-old to run on a treadmill because he believed he was too fat. The surveillance video of this is, it's not easy to watch. There's no question about it. But it got a lot worse than just the treadmill, okay? The kid died because of injuries believed that were sustained from chronic abuse. The mother said she tried hundreds of times to report the abuse. That's what this story's about for me. Do you know how hair-trigger CPS can be in parts of this country? Not here. Why didn't the system care? Next. All right, you heard about this case out of New Jersey about This guy abusing this little kid, trying to force him to exercise and do all other kinds of things. The kid wound up dead. 31-year-old Christopher Greger is on trial for the murder of his 6-year-old son, Corey Mitchell-Ello. Surveillance video, March 21st, 2001. You see the defendant who thought his son was too fat. Look, obviously, this guy's got problems, okay? The kid clearly is not fat, okay? Forcing this kid to run on a treadmill, keeps increasing the speed. The kid falls, father picks him up, makes him keep running. He's seen biting his son's head at one point. I mean, there's something wrong with the guy, okay? Now, the question is, why didn't the system get involved? I'm sure you've heard stories about how hair-trigger the system can be. I know I have. Not here. 11 days later, Greger is seen on a hospital video carrying his limp son into the ER. He says Corey woke up from a nap, confused and nauseous. An hour later, the kid was dead. Was Corey's father with him when he died? No, because his father had already taken off from the hospital, leaving the boy to die with no family by his side. Who leaves their kid in the hospital? Where was Corey's mother during all this? Brianna Mitchell-Ello. She had a history of drug abuse and had shared custody with Greger. You know, Greger, she says, didn't even really have a relationship with his son until he was about 4, when his mother petitioned for child support. Soon after, Greger started spending time with his son, and she noticed bruises, cuts on her son's body. So she says she called the Department of Child Protective and Preventive Services. She says she contacted him over 100 times, telling them Corey's father was abusing him. Took pictures, sent emails, documented it. No one did a damn thing. 2 days before her son's death, Corey's mother learned about the treadmill incident. Fearing for their kid's life, she filed an emergency custody request, and it was denied. The next day, a day before her son's death, she took him to a pediatrician in a hospital. They all said, yes, we see some bruising, but x-rays and blood work seem normal. They sent him home. The next day, Brianna had to drop Corey back at his dad's, as were the agreements, and that was the last time she saw him. Keep in mind, the initial autopsy said Corey died from blunt force trauma. Greger was charged with endangering the welfare of a child. Nearly a year later, a forensic pathologist hired by the state reviewed the autopsy and said Corey also died from laceration of the heart and liver. His injuries showed repeated abuse. Greger was then charged with murder. How did the system fail this? Joining us now is not the person in charge of the system for that state, because they're not going to want to come anywhere near it. And that's the problem, by the way. But we do have former prosecutor Matt Murphy, handled numerous child abuse cases like this, and forensic pathologist Dr. Banerjee. Doc, it's good to have you. Thank you very much for being on the show again. Do me a favor. Let's just look at the forensics here first. Why would it take so long for someone to do this? Is it about how long it takes, or was it about how long it took before somebody cared enough to look?
I think it was a misdiagnosis from the get-go. I think if you look at everything in totality, and obviously I have not seen the evidence, I'm just listening to what we all heard today in court. But I know Dr. Tom Andrew, he's very reliable, and what he describes, I can visualize. The body reacted to these injuries. Now, looking at a bruise, you can't time it. But when you're talking about a heart laceration, a liver laceration, that's major trauma. Kids have a lot of give, right? Because they're growing, they're bouncing. Little boys are hardy, right? So we want them to be bouncy. We want them to live. I don't know why there's a hemorrhage in the eye that no one picked up on. And you know, kids bump and bruise themselves, so I'm not one to overreact. I'm a mom. But when you keep having like repeated bruising, sometimes kids get worked up for having bleeding disorders, you know, because why is this happening so often? So to me, he was just lost to the system. And then my counterpart, who I'm not aware who did the autopsy, I think was wrong. When you have a reaction that was proven on the slides, just finishing my thought, which is the body trying to heal itself, right? The body systematically reacts to an injury. That's what validates that he was alive. May not be conscious, but he was alive when he sustained these injuries, and he was alive for hours after, because it takes a long time for the body to sort of react and try to, start the healing process.
Murph, help me understand the systemic part of this, because my experience with CPS is they're either hair trigger, where you hear these stories of people have them chasing after them for absolutely nothing because somebody made some naked allegation. And then you see this, where is it because she was an addict? I mean, is that why? I mean, how does the system explain 100 contacts and not going to the house and doing a check, which they seem to do in other cases like that?
Yeah, they can't explain it on this, Chris. They absolutely blew it, and there's some blame to go around here. Now, what's interesting is you look at that injury to his eye, and I think the doctor will back me up on this. That's what's called petechial hemorrhaging, and that's about as bad as it gets. That comes from pressure, which appears to be consistent with the cause of death on this. Those round marks that on his forehead, those are bite marks. I mean, textbook examples of that. So this child is clearly abused. I mean, as a lawyer, I can spot that instantly, and I've done quite a few of these, but for a doctor or a medical professional, those injuries should be screaming out. And also for CPS, Child Protective Services, there are also professionals that are trained in recognizing those kinds of injuries. That only happens with abuse, unless they got a sibling who's biting them, and there's no other kid in the picture here. So they can't explain it. They absolutely blew it. And the day before, you've got a judge who somehow denied her request for this emergency protective order. I think that one of the factors that you see in these things, Chris, is that people that are in the system, CPS workers, a lot of times judges in family court, you see so many false accusations, especially in custody disputes, that they get jaded. They're almost like 911 operators sometimes, where, they deal with 1,000 idiots in a row, hate to say it, but then when they finally get the real call, sometimes the 911 operators are really short and kind of rude and awful. And I think this might be one of those cases. They blew it, probably because that same judge had 20 of these and 19 of them were bogus.
What's the chance that he can beat the case by getting a juror to say, well, you heard what Banerjee said, kids are bouncing around and doing all this stuff. Who knows?
Well, okay, so that's a really interesting thing. These cases are traditionally very difficult to prove because it always winds up as a battle of the experts. You see that over and over again. Oftentimes cases like this deal with children that are younger, like shaken baby and things like that. You've always got two pathologists. I totally agree with the doctor here that they blew it in the original. Having a laceration to a heart can be consistent with CPR. But a laceration to the liver is a lot tougher to justify that. And one of the key points of evidence in this case isn't even the way he was acting, because a lot of people are talking about that regarding when he left the emergency room. One of the key pieces is that emergency room nurse who said, no, we did pediatric CPR, which isn't going to cause injuries, especially to his liver. So I think that that video of the treadmill is incredibly damning, and usually you don't get something like that. And right in the middle, if you look closely, he bites him in the head, and that's consistent with these other things that are coming in. So, I mean, there's still a chance here that you could get a wayward juror. I think at worst, though, based on this evidence, if I had to call it, the jury's going to hang at worst. And, of course, he's presumed innocent. I got to say that as an attorney. But, look, this evidence is very, very strong, and if I had to call it, I think he's going down based on what I've seen.
I hope that he has it in him to want to take the stand, to defend himself.
Yeah,
and if he does, then I think the truth is going to come out.
Yeah, that's game on, and then we'll see how skilled this prosecutor is. As a prosecutor, you always want that to happen because you want to stick it to him on the stand and let the jury make the call.
Tough guy. Dr. Banerjee, thank you so much. Brother Murphy, that was an excellent explanation of what's happening here and how it should go. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
I wish
Chris.
you didn't have the experience, but thank you for bringing it to bear here with us.
Isn't that the hard
Appreciate
part?
it. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Thank you. When we come back, how about you have your say? 844-968-7720. Let's get after it. All right, Dusty, who do you got?
Okay, we are going to start with Mark from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Hello.
Fort Lauderdale, beautiful place. What's your question?
Hey, Chris. I have a comment. You can reply. It's your show, but I don't totally disagree with with what you and Carville were volleying back and forth, but I do partly disagree in that I think the economy is the best in the world. I never hear anybody talking about property value, how much more worth your house is worth than 4 years ago. That's like money in the bank. And people complain about the price of rice, but they do have more money to spend. Otherwise, we wouldn't be setting records for retail and travel. And I think, yeah, I'm better off 4 years ago. You know why? Because I'm not in denial that we were in a pandemic, and we've come out of a pandemic because of the shots and everything else. And I mean, I'm not denying price of eggs are not higher, but everybody has more money, and that's my take. Thanks.
Well, hold on. Well, all right, Mark, thank you. Look, it's a matter of perspective, okay? It's not everybody has more money. And the unemployment rate is a little deceptive. We really should be looking at the underemployment rate. You know, people are having to work longer, work multiple jobs to make the same amount of money. And it's not going as far because prices are higher because of inflation. So, yeah, if you're fortunate enough to have equity in a home in a decent location, you're probably okay. But if you want to buy a home, you're not in as good a position, maybe even as it was a generation ago. And I think it's a very mixed bag. You know, it's become very, very bifurcated, this economy, meaning there's two different almost tranches and paths and realities. You have the investor economy, right? People who have money and equity in a home, stock portfolio, et cetera. And then you got the paycheck economy. And they're very different, and they're very different realities. And, you know, your shot at Trump about we're not in denial. Look, I got to tell you, that is also a matter of perspective. There are a lot of people who back Trump who are doing it because they don't believe in the vaccine, they don't believe in the mandates, they don't believe in what was done by government. And you can say, oh, they're all kooks. Well, they're not all kooks, okay? And they may be wrong or it may be incomplete, but the way that it was delivered, the way that it was reported, the way that a lot of things happened, fed their misgivings and their distrust. So the division is very real, and the economic reality is a divided one also. Next.
Next, we're going to go to Dave from Tamaqua, Pennsylvania.
Dave, what's your question?
Yeah, how you doing, Mr. Cuomo? This is so important. You keep talking about the open border and bringing it up. It's so important to us. And I believe that it's destroying our country. It's totally destroying like it's never been before, making us weaker than ever before. And I want to know if you agree with all this, that letting in the illegal immigrants with the open borders, they're letting in gang members, drug dealers, rapists, and lately the murderers are coming in. And Biden said he was going to do something about closing that border. That's what I wanted to know. Is he going to do an executive order to do something immediately? Because this is insane. It's destroying our country.
Well, he's not doing it immediately because he's had 3 years, right? And as James Carville just said, right, bigger Democrat than him, he gave into his left flank that has a very soft position on security at the southern border, which doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why wanting this country to be fed by diversity and people coming in and needing new blood and doing it properly, legally, and safely. I don't understand why those two things have to fight each other, but they do apparently within Mr. Biden's party. And, in politics, perception is often reality, certainly more than facts are. It's about feelings. And there are a lot of people like you in both parties that feel this was unnecessary. And now, the numbers are actually down the flow. Now, look, we have more than we do from historical levels. I'm not saying that they're down. I'm saying they're down on his watch from where they were on his watch, okay? They've gotten less bad on his watch. Why? Because he's redoing some of the things that he undid from the Trump administration. And look, I don't fake the funk with you guys, even though I'm always, called part of the conspiracy, part of the deep state, part of the media machine, whatever BS you want. But I'm no fan of President Trump as a person because of the way he treated me and my family. He made life hard for them unnecessarily because he didn't want to deal with my criticisms. And instead, he convinced people who support him that I'm an enemy and that I'm just against him and the country. And it worked. It worked enough that it caused agita in my family that they did not need and they don't deserve. So, and I'm telling you, he was better on the border than Trump was. His administration than Biden is. Trump's guys cut deals, controlled the flow, got home countries in Mexico to do more of it. And there was more of a spotlight on it, more attention. It wasn't perfect, but it was a hell of a lot better than it is now. Next.
Okay, next we're going to go to Sheila. She wants to talk about this awful story we just did about this little boy. Sheila.
Hello.
Sheila, what's your question?
Okay, so the CPS system in general, nationwide, needs to be revamped. They need to be investigated. In Arizona, I've seen cases where these workers don't even have the correct qualifications to have the job as an investigator. They just have like customer service and stuff like that. Maybe it's because they don't have enough people to hire, but it's a big problem.
I think they're overwhelmed. I think that often they value the wrong things. I think bias plays a role like anything else. It's very hard to believe that the mother, being a drug abuser, didn't have something to do with this. The system had found her unfit, and it's, essentially, and had given a lot of custody to the father. And I think that was a big part of it. But clearly, this is as bad as it gets. This is just pathetic. And I can't believe the trial is just of this guy. They should be chasing after the system. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll have NewsNation sit outside some of these people's offices and show them some pictures of the kid and say, how you feel about this? What are you going to change?